At 54, I had finally stopped flinching every time the phone rang, and then my son walked into my lake house with a woman I'd never met and said, "Mom, this is Vanessa. We got married in Maui. Don't be mad we didn't invite you." I just nodded, said congratulations, and quietly did one thing. The next morning, while Vanessa's coffee was still hot and her omelet was still steaming, I set a manila envelope down next to her plate, and I watched her perfect new life come apart one page at a time before she'd even finished her first bite. She came for my lake house. She left without her wedding ring. Let me tell you how it happened. My name is Renata Calloway, and I did not get to this house by being given anything. I spent 26 years married to a cardiologist named Paul who believed, with total sincerity, that his calendar was more important than my existence. When we divorced 4 years ago, I walked out with my dignity, half a pension, and a stubborn refusal to ever again organize my life around someone else's convenience. The lake house in northern Michigan came 18 months later, bought with money I'd earned building a small interior design consulting business from nothing, the kind of business people told me at 50 wouldn't work. The kind of business that worked anyway. I had 3 years in that house by the time this all started. 3 years of learning what it felt like to make coffee for one person and like it. My reading glasses lived on the porch railing. My garden gloves stayed by the back door, caked in dirt I was proud of. My life there was small and quiet, and entirely my own design, which after a marriage spent decorating around someone else's preferences. Felt like the most radical thing I'd ever done. So when my son Dean called me on a Thursday afternoon, his voice doing that bright, rehearsed thing it does when he's about to tell me something he already knows I won't love, I felt my stomach drop before he even got the sentence out. "Mom, so funny story," he said. "Vanessa and I got married last weekend, in Maui. It was just us. Very spontaneous, very us. We're driving up to the lake house tonight, to celebrate properly, just the 3 of us. You're going to love her." I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and felt something I can only describe as grief wearing the costume of surprise. My son had gotten married, and I had found out the way you find out about a sale at the grocery store, in passing after the fact, with an apology already built in so I wouldn't have time to react to the actual news before he moved on to logistics. "Congratulations," I said. "Because what else do you say? I'd love to meet her." They arrived at 7 that evening in a car too nice for either of their salaries, which I noted and filed away the way I'd learned to file things away during my marriage. Quietly, without comment, for later. Dean got out first, looking like a man who'd rehearsed his entrance, and then the passenger door opened, and Vanessa stepped out in a white sundress that had clearly never seen a kitchen. Sunglasses pushed up into hair that had been highlighted somewhere expensive. "Renata," she said, walking toward me with both arms extended, like we were old friends finally reunited. "I have heard so much about you. Dean talks about this house constantly. It's even more stunning in person." "Does he?" I said, accepting the hug, "because what else do you do on your own porch with your son standing right there watching?" "We're so sorry to just show up like this," Dean said, which was, I'd learn over the next 48 hours, the most polite lie this family was capable of telling, because nobody who's actually sorry shows up anyway and then says sorry as a formality on the way through the door. It was completely last minute. Vanessa added, already moving past me into the entryway, her sandals clicking on my hardwood floor like she was assessing it for resale value, which, it turned out, she essentially was. "Hotels felt so impersonal for our first few days as a married couple, and you always have room. Dean said you love having people stay." I had said that exactly once, 4 years ago to my sister, about hosting Thanksgiving. I had not said it about a daughter-in-law I'd known for 90 seconds taking up residence in my guest room indefinitely. "How long are you two thinking?" I asked, keeping my voice the kind of pleasant that costs you something to maintain. "Just a few days," Dean said. "We haven't really decided," Vanessa said, at the exact same moment with the breezy confidence of a woman who has never once had to consider that other people's lives continue when she's not centering them. "Of course," I said. "Let me get the guest room ready." As I walked them upstairs, I watched Vanessa's eyes move across my house, the way a person's eyes move. When they're not admiring something, they're appraising it. Across the stone fireplace I'd had rebuilt myself, along the lake-facing windows that had cost more than my first car, over the kitchen I'd renovated with my own design plans and my own money. "This is incredible," she said, and she meant it, but not like a guest means it. She meant it like a realtor walking a listing before pricing it. I noticed. I didn't say anything yet. That evening, while Dean and Vanessa took a walk down to the dock, I changed the sheets in the guest room and tried to name the feeling, sitting in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. It wasn't only the wedding I'd missed, though that hurt in a way I hadn't fully let myself feel yet. It was something underneath that, something about the particular way Vanessa's eyes had measured my staircase, my square footage, my view. By dinner I had my first real piece of evidence. Dean stepped outside to take a work call, and Vanessa poured herself a glass of my good Cabernet without asking, then settled into my reading chair, the one with the worn arm where I sat every morning, like she'd already decided it was hers. "Renata," she said, "can I be honest with you about something?" Here it comes, I thought. "Dean and I have been talking, and we really do care about you so much." She swirled the wine. "It's just, you're out here alone. 2 hours from the nearest hospital, and what if something happened? A fall, a stroke, anything. We worry." I watched her face. She'd practiced this in a mirror somewhere. "We think it might be smart to start thinking about something more manageable. Maybe a condo closer to Dean and me, somewhere with people around." I set down my fork. "And this house?" "Well," she said, choosing her words with the care of someone laying out a chessboard. "Dean mentioned I have some background in property investment. There's real opportunity in a lake house like this, properly positioned, short-term rentals, maybe a sale to the right buyer at the right time. It could really set you up for retirement." The stone in my chest turned to ice, properly positioned, by her. Dean came back in right on cue, his charming, slightly anxious smile fully reassembled. "Mom, I hope Vanessa mentioned our only concern here is you. Your safety, your comfort." "She did," I said. "The market up here is incredible right now," Vanessa said. "Lakefront like this, in this condition, we could structure something that's completely comfortable for you. You wouldn't have to deal with any of the details." The details, right? The details like the sale price that would mysteriously undervalue the property, the management fees, the monthly disbursements that would somehow always be running a little late. "That's very thoughtful of you both," I said, in a tone that sounded like gratitude and meant nothing of the kind. "I'll think about it." Vanessa relaxed back into my chair. Dean smiled like he'd accomplished something. Neither of them noticed I hadn't agreed to a single word. The next morning I understood exactly what I was dealing with. I was at the stove scrambling eggs for 3. When Vanessa delivered the line that would define the next 2 days of my life. She didn't look up from her phone. "Renata, I think we should talk about expectations while we're here." Dean was at my kitchen island, reading something on his laptop, a habit he'd apparently developed in the last 24 hours that turned my counter into his office and my home into his backdrop. "What kind of expectations?" I asked. "I just mean, Dean's used to a certain rhythm in the mornings. He likes a quiet house for his calls, he's up early, and he really values a proper breakfast to start the day. Since you're up early anyway and you're so good at all this." She gestured vaguely at my kitchen, my stove, my life. "It wouldn't be much extra to just have something ready by 6. I kept my face neutral. 6 in the morning. She wanted me up at 5 to prepare a full breakfast for my own son, and a woman I'd met yesterday, in my own house, that they were actively trying to take from me. Dean looked up from his laptop with the same practiced sincerity Vanessa had used the night before. "Mom, we'd really appreciate it. You're such an amazing host." Host, as though I'd sent invitations. "Maybe French toast," Vanessa added. "Or a frittata, whatever's easy for you. You're so domestic, it's honestly one of your best qualities." One of my best qualities. As though running my own household for 3 years alone was a talent I should be grateful to perform on request. 6 a.m., I said. "I'll make sure it's perfect." Dean smiled like he'd won something. He had no idea what he'd actually just agreed to receive. They drove into the nearest town that afternoon, ostensibly for groceries, though I later learned they'd also stopped at a real estate office to ask about comparable lakefront sales in the area. I stayed home and did what any woman who has spent 54 years learning to notice the things people don't say out loud would do. I opened my laptop. Vanessa Reyes Hartley, the search results called her, real estate assessment consultant, asset acquisition specialist, whatever that meant. The first thing I found was 3 LLCs registered in her name over 6 years. 2 dissolved within the past year, the kind of pattern that doesn't read as failure. It reads as strategy. Shell companies opened for a single purpose and closed before consequences could find them. The third, Hartley Premier Holdings, was still active. The second thing I found was a property in Toledo. A small apartment complex, currently tangled in a foreclosure filing with her name attached as managing member. The third thing made my hands go very still on the keyboard. A civil suit filed by 4 elderly homeowners outside Toledo, claiming they'd been persuaded to sign their properties over below market value to a management company that promised steady monthly rental income. The income had never come. The company named in the suit was Hartley Premier Holdings. I sat with that for a long moment, then kept going. Vanessa had been married before. Her ex-husband's name was Marcus Whitfield. He'd owned a small landscaping business in Columbus, 15 years of work, solid reputations, full client roster. The business had been sold abruptly 14 months ago, right around when his divorce from Vanessa finalized. I found him through a contractors association listing and sent him a short, careful message. Then I called Doris Albany. Doris was listed as the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit. She was 74, widowed, and had owned her home outside Toledo for 41 years. She picked up on the third ring. We talked for nearly an hour. By the time Dean and Vanessa got back from town, cheerfully reporting that comparable lakefront properties had been moving fast and well above asking, I knew exactly who Vanessa was, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. That night I served dinner on the good china I'd inherited from my grandmother, poured wine I'd been saving for an occasion that actually deserved it, and listened to my son and his wife of 6 days discuss my home. As though it were already a line item on a spreadsheet, Vanessa talked about converting the boathouse into a rental unit, listing the property on vacation platforms, projected yield. Dean nodded along, using the word we, for decisions that were entirely mine to make. He'd always been a little like this, my son, drawn to whoever sounded most certain in any room, borrowing their confidence like a jacket he hadn't earned. He had no idea he was the door. Vanessa had used to let herself into my life. After they went up to bed, I cleaned the kitchen and went back to my laptop. Marcus had replied. His message ran 4 paragraphs. The last line said, "If you need a statement from me, you have it. Just tell me what's happening to you." By 11 I had everything assembled. Marcus's account, Doris's documentation, the lawsuit filing, and a detailed complaint I submitted to the Michigan Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Then I went to bed. At 5 the next morning, my alarm went off, and I got up without a second of hesitation. The kitchen was dark and silent, and I moved through it the way I always do before sunrise, slow, deliberate, by feel rather than by light. I ground the coffee fresh and strong. I made the French toast with real cinnamon and good butter, because even in the middle of taking someone apart, I wasn't going to do sloppy work. I am good at this, I have always been good at this. But the real preparation had happened the night before. I'd printed everything, the LLC filings, the foreclosure notice, the lawsuit, with Hartley Premier Holdings highlighted in yellow, Marcus's statement, Doris's documentation, and the confirmation number from the Attorney General's office, and slid it all into a plain manila envelope. On the front, in my own handwriting, I wrote, "Before you say another word about my house, read this." At 5:45 I heard movement upstairs. Vanessa came down first, in a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, looking pleased that everything had been laid out exactly as requested. "Renata, this looks amazing," she said, sitting down, reaching for the coffee I'd poured into my grandmother's china. "You said 6, I said. I take people at their word." She lifted the cup, inhaled, looked for a moment like a genuinely happy woman. Then her eyes landed on the envelope beside her plate. She picked it up. Read the handwriting, set the cup back down. "What is this?" she said, not a question, a calculation already starting. "My morning contribution to the conversation," I said. She opened it. I watched her face the way you watch a storm cross open water, slow, then all at once. The first page, the LLC filings. Her jaw tightened slightly. The second, the foreclosure notice. The third, the lawsuit. Hartley Premier Holdings highlighted in yellow. She got to Marcus's statement and stopped moving entirely. I heard Dean on the stairs, taking his time, expecting to find the morning already handled the way mornings always were when someone else did the handling. Vanessa looked up. The warmth had drained completely out of her face, and what was left wasn't anger, not yet. It was the look of someone running very fast math. "Renata," she said, dropping any pretense of warmth in my name, "where did you get this?" "Public record," I said. "It's a remarkable thing, the internet." Dean came into the kitchen, took one look at the temperature of the room and stopped in the doorway. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Vanessa said too fast. "Vanessa found the envelope I left with her breakfast," I said. I looked at my son, 29 years of history between us. He wasn't a bad person. He was a person who'd been carefully worked by someone who'd made a career of finding the right lever in the right man, and pulling it slowly enough that he never felt the pressure until it was too late. "Dean, sit down. There are some things about your wife's professional history I think you need to hear." Vanessa tried. "I'll give her that. She called Doris's claim complicated. She called Marcus's statement bitter. He never got over the divorce. She called the lawsuit a misunderstanding from investors who didn't fully grasp market conditions." Every time she spoke, her voice pulled a little tighter and her explanations got a little more elaborate, which is always the sound of a story that wasn't built to survive close reading. Dean sat very still through all of it, watching her the way I'd watched her the day before, quietly, carefully, adding things up. "The wedding," he said finally, almost to himself. "You wanted to get married before you ever met my mother. You said it was romantic, that we shouldn't wait, but you needed access first. You knew about this house before you knew her name. I told you about it on our third date. I said my mom had a place on the lake and you said, 'A whole lake house, that's serious.'" The room went very quiet. Vanessa stood up. She was done calculating, and she'd moved straight into damage control. "There's been a serious miscommunication here," she said, in the voice of a woman who has said that exact sentence many times before, to many people. "I filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office yesterday," I said. That stopped her cold. "It includes Doris Albany's documentation, Marcus Whitfield's statement, and a detailed account of a pattern targeting elderly property owners. They were already investigating you. My filing just added the most recent piece." Something moved across Vanessa's face, several things in quick succession, and then she turned and went upstairs. We could hear her moving fast, drawers, a closet door, a zipper. Dean didn't follow her. He sat at my kitchen table with his hands flat on the wood, like he was trying to keep something from shaking. Vanessa was gone within 15 minutes. She took her suitcase, her silk robe and her composure, and she left without saying a word to either of us, which was probably the most honest thing she'd done since walking through my door. She also left her phone on the counter, screen lit, buzzing with messages. A name appeared on it that I recognized. Doris Albany. I picked it up and answered, "Mrs. Hartley?" The voice was cautious, elderly, with something hard underneath the caution. "This is Renata Calloway," I said. "Doris, I think some investigators may have reached out to you recently." A pause. "Then, they called yesterday afternoon. Said someone had filed a new complaint." "That was me," I said. Another pause, longer this time, and then Doris Albany, 74 years old, who had nearly lost the home she'd lived in for 41 years to a woman who specialized in making theft look like opportunity, said something I will never forget. "Thank you," she said. "I've been waiting 2 years for someone to believe me." I held the phone carefully, like it might break. "I believed you the moment we spoke," I said. When I hung up, Dean was watching me from the table, his eyes red in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "She told me she loved me," he said. "I know. She just seemed so sure about everything. I liked that. I liked not having to be the one who figured things out." "I know that too," I said. "Because I spent 26 years doing the exact same thing with your father." I sat down across from him. "Dean, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth." He looked at me. "Did you know, even a little?" He held my eyes for a long time. "No," he said finally. "But I think some part of me didn't want to look too closely. And I'm starting to understand that's almost the same thing." It was the most honest sentence my son had said to me in years. "Okay," I said. "Then we figure out what comes next." The Attorney General's office called me 4 days later. Vanessa Hartley was now formally under investigation for elder fraud. Her recent activity connected to a pattern investigators had been building a file on for nearly 2 years. Doris's case was being reopened with new documentation. Marcus's statement was entered into the official record, And the real estate attorney I quietly consulted afterward confirmed that if I had agreed to Vanessa's proposal, even informally, I would have signed away effective control of my property to a company with no real obligation to ever pay me a dime. I would have become the next Doris Albany. Except I hadn't agreed to anything. Because nobody who has spent 3 years rebuilding her own piece hands it to a stranger in a silk robe, just because that stranger tells her she's getting older. Dean stayed for 2 more weeks, not as a guest expecting to be waited on, but as my son, who needed somewhere to land while he figured out what the rest of his life was going to look like. He fixed the loose step on the dock without being asked. He sat with me on the porch in the evenings and didn't talk much, which was its own kind of apology. He didn't once suggest what I should do with my house. On his last morning, we sat on the dock together and watched the water go from gray to gold. "I'm filing for an annulment," he said. "The marriage was 6 days. There's still time to make it like it never happened, legally anyway." "That's the right call," I said. "I'm going to take some time," he said. "Before I trust someone that completely again." "Also the right call," I said. He looked at me sideways. "You knew something was off the second we pulled in, didn't you?" I thought back to that evening, the car too nice for either of their salaries. Vanessa's eyes moving across my staircase like she was pricing it. "I knew something felt wrong," I said. "I just needed a day to figure out what, and then you made her breakfast anyway." "I made exactly what was asked of me," I said. "I always do." Dean looked back out at the water. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "And I love you." Both things are true at the same time. That envelope, the one I left beside Vanessa Hartley's French toast at 6 in the morning, cost me nothing but an afternoon of research and one focused, sleepless night. What it protected was everything. Not just the house, although the house is mine, and I plan to grow old in it watching the water do what water does every single morning whether anyone's paying attention or not. What it protected was the simple, hard-won truth that I have earned the right to know who I am. I am not fragile. I am not someone who needs managing. I am 54 years old. I live alone on a lake in northern Michigan. I cook for one and like it. I read too many mystery novels and let my coffee go cold while I finish one more chapter, and that is the life I built. On my own terms, with my own 2 hands, and no one, not a son's new wife with an expensive robe and a well-rehearsed concern about my well-being, is going to take it from me without a fight. Doris Albany has a hearing date now. Marcus Whitfield's statement is part of the official record. And I have my dock back, my quiet mornings back, my house exactly as I left it. Some people will tell you that once you reach a certain age, the world starts making decisions on your behalf, that people stop asking what you want and start informing you of what you need. That anyone who sees a woman living alone reads it as an opening. What I want to say to those people, and to every woman watching who knows precisely what I'm describing, is this. Let them come with their concern and their envelopes of their own. The proposal's dressed up as care, because you can have an envelope too, and yours will be better researched.